Okay, so here's how to play Varus in Season 14. Varus is another one of these, let's call them, chameleon champions. No matter which items are currently strong, Varus will find a way to take advantage of them because his playstyle is so flexible. He works with all kinds of different keystones, accentuating different aspects of his kits, and can then craft his build around that. And it just so happens that lethality items are outright crazy right now. Lethality as a stat is at its strongest point ever since its inception, so naturally Lethality Varus is an extremely threatening pick. But even beyond everything related to the meta, Varus also comes with the immense utility and playmaking potential of his ultimate, which will always be a high-value asset in solo queue. Crowd control wins games, as the saying goes, and Varus has one of the best crowd control spells imaginable. However, there are still lots of pitfalls when playing Lethality Varus, especially when it comes to his runes, his item choices, and his positioning. It is very easy and quite devastating to get any one of these three aspects wrong, but in this video I will of course give you all the information you need to start winning with Varus in Season 14. Because, you know, winning is way more fun than losing, but more often than not, after losing a game, you cannot even tell for sure if your team was just too bad, or if there was something you could have done to still carry your allies to victory. But this is where my sponsors from Solo Queue Solution come in. As you might know, you can count the number of sponsor deals I took since I started YouTube on one hand. However, Solo Queue Solution is a League of Legends coaching company whose goal it is to help as many players as possible to achieve their dream of reaching high elo, which is literally the exact same thing I try to accomplish with this channel, and therefore the reason why I chose to partner with them long term. Solo Queue Solution offers a premium one-on-one coaching service, and all their coaches are high elo challenger players who understand the game League of Legends like no other. The coach will work with you in one-on-one sessions, tell you exactly what you need to do in order to climb, and even if you are hard stuck in low elo, you will be a true diamond level player after taking the full course. So if you are a passionate solo queue player and want to excel at your hobby, you can find booking information, etc. in the description of this video. Okay, so let's talk about Varus's rune choices. Quite a few people play Lethality Varus with an Arcane Comet rune page to maximize Varus's poke damage, especially during the lane phase, but this is actually the wrong approach. A far better Varus rune page is Hail of Blades, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection and Treasure Hunter with Biscuit Delivery and Cosmic Insights secondary. Sure, the added damage from Arcane Comet on your Q and your E would be nice, but Hail of Blades actually offers a lot more than that. You have to keep in mind Varus is not all about his spells, he also has above average auto attack range, so it is very easy for him to take advantage of Hail of Blades. Additionally, all of these direct damage keystones like Dark Harvest, Electrocute or Arcane Comet got nerfed a couple patches ago, and their AD ratios are pretty much gutted. So the actual payoff for landing these Arcane Comets is not as high as it used to be, whereas Hail of Blades effectively has a 100% AD ratio. It gives you extra auto attacks you would not have gotten otherwise, so unless the rune someday states the auto attacks triggered by Hail of Blades only deal half damage or whatever, this rune will always be the best at scaling. In the mid and late game it just does way more than any other keystone, and even in lane the triple auto attack deals a lot of damage and applies a lot of pressure, giving you lane priority for even a single mistake the enemy makes. The value from the extra attack speed is even further increased by the fact that with a lethality build, all you do is buy damage. So without any extra attack speed in your build, all the damage in your items will be multiplied effectively by the Hail of Blades value. The rune just makes for a strong early and a strong late game, and that's all you need to hear really. Now Taste of Blood is also a natural choice if you want to get the most mileage out of your lane phase, because it is a really strong rune at this point. It is very easy to trigger even in bad matchups because you have such long range on your spells, so you will always have some agency in lane no matter what. And even if that just means sitting back and farming with your spells, it is very hard to pressure you out of lane. Now Eyeball Collection is the natural choice in the next row because, well, you don't have Umbral Glaive in your core build and the other rune doesn't really make sense, and Eyeball Collection is just stacking AD, perfect for snowballing, and lethality builds typically are looking for those snowball situations. And speaking of which, Treasure Hunter is another snowballing rune that greatly accentuates the value of lethality because the faster you get your lethality items, the more value they have because base armor is still very low. But a noteworthy alternative in this slot would be Ultimate Hunter. Varus's ultimate has a lot of value, as I've already said and as you probably know, so Ultimate Hunter looks like a natural option, but Treasure Hunter with lethality is very synergistic, so I would still recommend Treasure Hunter over Ultimate Hunter, but it is a thing of personal preference ultimately. Now the secondary rune path is almost a painful choice. While Biscuit Delivery is a no-brainer because you need the mana for the lane phase, the other rune on that path is actually very interesting and very close. Cosmic Insight is a very strong rune on Varus because it allows you to stack your tier faster, it gives you more uptime on your Ghostblade, it gives you more uptime on your trinkets, and a lower summoner cooldown. All things Varus cares about a lot. However, the alternative would be Magical Footwear. Magical Footwear is always a strong rune on AD carries, as I've said in multiple videos by now, because it allows you to get your item 300 gold faster. You don't need to spend money on boots, so you just get your item instead. Makes sense. Now AD carries scale with items like crazy, but especially lethality champions want items fast, because as I've said, base armor is low in early levels. So it is a close call between Cosmic Insight and Magical Footwear, and also comes down to preference, I would say, but especially in lanes in which you don't need boots early, it is a consideration. Okay, with that being said, we can now talk about items, and you really can't talk about items for lethality AD carry without addressing Hubris. Hubris is really making waves right now, and a lot of champions try to abuse this item because the stacking AD is just so tempting. It is a very strong snowballing item in fact, and it would be part of a damage optimized Varus build for sure, but Varus doesn't really care about the Hubris scaling all that much. The utility he gets from other lethality items is more valuable on this champion, generally speaking. While buying Hubris is not a mortal sin, it is quite greedy, and you're probably better off on average skipping this item on Varus. You have to keep in mind, most champions buy Hubris to not fall off in the late game, but Varus will never fall off in the late game. He has his ultimate for great utility, and he also has percent HP damage in his kit with his W stacks. With that being said, the optimal build I recommend is, for your core build, well, you start with Thorin's Blade, get a tier of the Goddess as fast as possible, then a serrated Dirk, then upgrade Boots of Swiftness, then upgrade Dirk to Ghostblade, and then upgrade tier to Manamune. If you go for this core with this sequence every single game, you will have a good time. Again, Varus has high damage and high utility, and his biggest weakness is his immobility. He is just so easy to take advantage of once you're out of position, and movement speed is your only true line of defense. Again, some people swap Ghostblade for Hubris, and even swap Boots of Swiftness for Boots of Lucidity, but again, movement speed is a game changer, and if you're dead, you don't deal any damage, you have to keep that in mind. This movement speed will save your life more often than not. Also, for what it's worth, there is a slight neat interaction with Varus' Q and Boots of Swiftness, because Boots of Swiftness give a slow resist, so when you self-slow while charging Q, you're not as self-slowed as normally, and you can position more freely while doing that. Just a little fun fact to keep in mind. Anyway, the standard continuation of the build and the standard full build after getting your Swifties, your Ghostblade and your Manamune would be Opportunity next, then Edge of Night, then last item Cyrilda's Grudge. It is almost a shame you're getting Cyrilda's Grudge that late, because it is also the best damage item for lethality builds in the mid-game. But the same with Hubris, Varus really values the utility of the other items, and Opportunity, very similar to Ghostblade, also provides lots of movement speed, which is again your main line of defense. Also, lethality Varus needs to find ways to make use of his passive, because, well, you're still the AD carry, you need to provide DPS, and Opportunity provides you with the movement speed to get in range to start auto-attacking after you've landed your spells. Once the first target falls, your passive triggers and Opportunity triggers, so you just run up to the next target and start auto-attacking. Now, Edge of Night also keeps you safe, provides a spell shield and some health, makes it more difficult for the enemy to actually do something to you once they close the gap, so it is quite nice in the late game where dying is really costly for your team. But again, these three late game items are also kind of situational. Sometimes you need Edge of Night earlier even, sometimes you need Cyrilda's Grudge earlier if they have really tanky tag champions, but this is the general gist of it. Opportunity, Edge of Night, Cyrilda's Grudge. Of course, there are also other options, such as Serpent's Fang or Umbral Glaive, who do have their places in some matchups. Serpent's Fang should be self-explanatory. If the enemy have lots of shields on their team, there's good value in Serpent's Fang, especially if none of your other teammates can buy the item for themselves. Umbral Glaive is even more situational, because it's only really good against trap champions. But Teemo, for example, is really strong right now, so if the enemy have a Teemo, Umbral Glaive can save your team's life. Detecting and killing the traps takes away a lot of Teemo's damage. Same with Shaco, for example. You need to find ways to counter these champions. Now, one last item we need to address before we go into the analysis is Axiom Arc. Axiom Arc is one of these items, again, that looks good on paper, because more uptime on your ultimate seems nice when a champion has such a strong ultimate like Varus, but in reality it is overkill. The item provides nothing else really, and if you play around your ult cooldown naturally, you should be fine either way. There pretty much is no chance you find yourself in a situation where you can ult twice per teamfight, and even if, after landing a devastating first ult, the teamfight is won, what more do you want? Item slots are very valuable, and the opportunity cost you pay by going for Axiom Arc is quite high, the same as with Hubris really. Varus needs his utility. Positioning is quite crucial on this champion, as you will now see during the analysis. As long as the enemy jungler leaves you alone, Varus actually has a very strong and easy lane phase. You have above average range, and Hail of Blades in combination with that makes for very good early pressure even before any lethality items. This in fact means Varus can contest lane bullies, if you play carefully of course. And you don't mind trading early as a consequence, and you usually come out ahead if that happens, but you always have that late game insurance, that utility of your ultimate, so no pressure in lane really. If a quiet lane phase is what happens, Varus is still fine. Quite frankly, Varus' only real weakness is his lack of mobility. Everything else is quite perfect, not just the late game utility with ultimate, but you also have enormous damage follow-ups when your support finds an engage. One very important detail, especially for the newer Varus players out there, always remember to activate your W before charging Q. Many people forget this and miss out on tons of execute damage. Varus' W has an active component, make use of it. However, Varus' general game plan in lane is not all in, but rather poke. You have above average range, and even without a poke keystone, you get excellent pressure with your spells, especially after you get tier. Your oppressive range on Q and E is definitely something you need to take advantage of if you want to play this champion to its full potential, and you also need tier stacks of course to get your Manamune transformed as fast as possible. And this playstyle allows you to stay at a safe distance too. This means you get reliably to your level 6 power spike where you can really start to make plays for your team yourself. The hitbox on Varus' ultimate is actually deceptively wide, so it is very easy to catch an enemy who is mid-action or otherwise distracted. Also the animation is rather narrow, at least much narrower than the actual hitbox, so connecting the spell is surprisingly easy. You also have an even easier method of landing the spell by just using your E as setup because the enemy would be slowed, or just by waiting for your support, jungle, or any other teammate to land a crowd control spell first to guarantee that your ult connects. However, as good as all these qualities may be, it is really easy for the enemy to take advantage of Varus' lack of mobility. You have zero outplay tools once you're out of position. But please watch closely, as here's an example of how you must play to avoid such problems with this champion. The term being out of position sounds like such an abstract concept, but in reality all it really means is not allowing enemies to sneak behind you. Yes, in some cases that means giving up tons of minions, but that's just a small price to pay in exchange for your safety. As Graves was actively trying to flank Varus, Varus would have retreated even more in that situation, but he sees the teleport from his teammate, so he knows he is safe to approach the tier 1 tower again and turn the situation around from there, because now he has the support of not only his tower, but also from Sylas. Anyway, as we just saw, it depends on your team if Varus can make use of his strengths or not. It is very easy to win lane with this champion when your support and your jungle especially play around you, but if the enemy camps you and threatens to flank all over again, you will have to give up your tower to avoid getting killed. Yes, it is frustrating because it is beyond your control, but positioning safely should always be a priority on Varus, as he is an immobile, high-value target. Of course, all of this remains true even when lane phase is over, since you have to respect numbers advantage and the possibility that you might get flanked. You have to be ready to avoid this at all costs, because once you're dead, the enemy just gets a huge opening. And, to some of you naturally, this passive, reactive playstyle might seem not as exciting, but the reality is you don't deal damage when you're dead and you would be missing out on opportunities like this one. Yes, Varus, being the priority target he is, died in the end of the sequence, but this was a 2v3, and even when outnumbered, Varus can still swing the situation in his team's favor if you position safely enough to actually apply your damage and crowd control. But in true full-fledged 5v5 teamfights, it is even easier for you to position safely since allies can protect you here. It is also virtually impossible to miss your ultimate in this situation, because you always just use it as follow-up engage on a locked-up target. This spell by itself can already win the fight for you, not even taking your massive damage output into account. It is of course also possible to find the engage yourself with your ultimate, but missing this spell would give the enemy a huge window for counterplay, so I advise you to stay on the safe side and mainly use it as follow-up engage. Okay, so now you know how to coordinate the team fights as Varus with your ultimate, but you also need to be able to apply your damage to actually finish the enemy off. Fortunately though, this is the easy part. You gun down the locked up target with Hail of Blades and Blight stacks, so you can then keep fighting with your passive. Unlike most lethality ADCs, Varus still very much feels like a regular marksman here. With plenty of attack speed from your passive and movement speed from items, you just kite front to back once the first domino falls. But you have to always keep in mind that plays like these live and die with your positioning. Getting flanked equals getting killed in one hit on Varus. Good macro is therefore the most important aspect of this champion, but if you struggle with that, you can watch my full AD carry macro guide by clicking the link on your screen.